Okay, I think it's recording. I don't. Oh wait, there's a red blinky thing. Okay, I think it's recording. Um, okay, we're gonna. This is kind of the permaculture smackdown again. Only years ago, all I had to do was show up. Apparently, this time I'm going to have to like do things afterwards. And also this time, we're inviting my Patreon supporters to participate. And so I have 3 of them on this call right now. Um, I don't know. Maybe you guys should announce yourselves. But first, Julia, you guys actually have to unmute your microphone thingy in order to be able to
Right.
speak.
Sorry. Hello.
So, Julia, I actually recorded a podcast with you at least twice before that I can remember.
Yeah, we've talked about movies and stuff. Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. And I visited your property.
You did. You saw the most beautiful rocket oven in the world.
The mosaic.
And had some pizza. Yeah, with
Yeah.
the mosaic
Right.
cover.
Right. And then another person here is Katie. Katie was here at the PDC 2 years ago, or like a year and a half ago or so.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm still a newbie.
But you've listened to most of the podcasts.
Yeah, those are great.
And I'm not sure, but Julia, haven't you listened to like most of the podcasts too?
I think I've listened to just about all the podcasts because I was working hard on it 8 years ago, and I've kept up since then.
All right. All right. And then Ryan, did you want to say anything about who you are?
Yeah, sure. Hi. I think I'm kind of one of the newer people to this community. I found Permies like maybe 4 years ago, right when I bought a piece of property in California. But I've just been kind of lurking for a long time. I didn't know this was going to be a podcast today, but I just figured it would be something fun to do on a Saturday afternoon.
I think it falls into the realm of we'll see how it goes. I mean, I'm not sure. I know that the pod people want more podcasts, and I'm recording it now, so you know I can do that when we're done. Send it off to be in the podcast stream. And then it looks like we have another person who I'm not sure is a Patreon supporter. Elliot, are you on my Patreon, or did you hijack this?
Oh, I was hijacked. Yes.
Oh, you were hijacked. Okay.
I was hijacked. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Well, I sort of get the friends and family Patreon status, I guess.
Okay. All right.
Being married and all, you know.
Okay. All right. So to start off with, I thought it'd be fun to take a look at this lovely picture. And so there was a guy who said he wrote to Permies. He posted something on Permies and basically said something like, "Hey, can I bring some stuff over?" And I just, and the way he described it, like he said something about VHS tapes, and I kind of thought, oh, buddy, no. But eventually we kind of said, fine, all right. Well, he showed up with this massive mountain of awesome stuff and no VHS tapes at all. And so one of the things was this planer, and there were quite a few tools that had some rust on them and needed some love. And so we had a new boot start this week, and so she took it and she gave it the love it was wanting. And so you can see the all cleaned up version. So there's the all extra rusty version, and then she went to work on it. And apparently how it started is that a couple of guys had built some shelves, because we're having quite the cold snap right now. And so these guys built some shelves down in the shop, and they were talking about like, oh, you know, we want to sand it a little bit. And I said, well, rather than using a sander, why don't you use a plane? And then you could kind of, smooth it out with a plane. And so she was there and she heard me say that. And then she found this plane and kind of cleaned it up real good and got it back into serviceable shape. I think it
It's
looks real nice.
beautiful. Yeah. And then you get shavings. Are the shavings helpful in your rocket mass heaters?
Oh yeah. Wow. Because they come off as these little curlicues, right? And then you take the curlicues and man, that's some of the best fire starter in the world. So
that's much better than sandpaper, which just gets clogged up and you have to throw it away.
Well, yeah, sandpaper is also made out of glue and paper and stuff, and it's kind of like you use it up and then you got to go buy more. I kind of feel like a plane is something you can sharpen and use over and over again.
Well, and a plane also will make things flat, whereas sandpaper will simply make things smooth. And there's a real difference between the two.
Yeah. I just like the quality that you get from a plane better. And I just feel like I can do more with it. And I think for most times a manual plane goes faster than even a power sander. And so I just kind of feel like this kind of manual tool is more aligned with our values. So I just prefer to see it used. I mean, we have sandpaper, and the boots can use sandpaper, and that's all cool and great. Here's a picture showing that the sawmill is currently in action. Although I know when I went down there and said, "How's it going?" Then they had stopped it to visit for a second, and I noticed that the belt was broken. So we had to order some more belts, and hopefully we'll be back online on Monday and creating lots and lots of new wood. So here's one of the new boots with the kittens that have now turned into cats. Here's Lara out learning how to plow one of our roads for the snow. And then Lara with the cats. Now, here's the Love Shack. And we've got somebody currently staying in the red cabin. And it's cold enough that it's difficult to work on the greenhouse. So the greenhouse is on hold. And the idea is that both the Love Shack and the red cabin need proper insulation. But since somebody's staying in the red cabin, then it's like, let's do the Love Shack first. And with a cold snap, the idea is like, okay, there's a rocket mass heater in there. Let's, fire up the rocket mass heater and then reinstall the insulation. But it's kind of been turning into one of those things where like you start to do a little bit and then you're like, but if we just did 50% more, it would be 100% better. And then, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now they've taken off the interior walls, and all of the old insulation. I think they're going after the ceiling in there next. And there's even talk about doing something with the floors. And the project is now about 3 times bigger, but it's such a small structure, it probably shouldn't take very long.
So they're basically rebuilding it. They're gonna.
Yeah. Well, kind of. I mean, here you can kind of see some of the interior wood, and here they've taken out the insulation. You can kind of see the exterior wall, and how it was a board and batten style, and then there's like this opening to the outside that was left there.
Oh.
And so rather than like come up with a way to kind of cork that opening, they took all the board and batten down, and they fired up the router, and they're reshaping the wood to use it for board and batten style. Well, no, sorry, not board and batten, to use it as a lap style. So they'll do lap wood. So it'll seal up a lot better.
That's going to be hung horizontally now instead of vertically?
No.
Or are they going to put it on vertically but lap it? Okay.
I think they're going to put it on vertically but lap it. But because if you look at this picture, you can see that the eaves are quite significant.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, we're not concerned about water getting into the structure. So like if you were to put them on horizontally, it's like, okay, if water hit here, then it's not going to get in because it's going to run down, kind of a thing. But I don't know. I'm leaving it up to Josiah to decide. Josiah's enjoying this project quite a lot. And
What
so
are they using for insulation?
that is a great question. The standards that we have up at the lab are much higher than at base camp. And we talked about, like, there's I mean, we used loose wool in the red cabin, and it is now creating problems. So then we talked about a type of insulation that's sold as home insulation, that is sheep's wool. But it's like we'd have to order it. We haven't even priced it, and we're ready to do the project immediately. So then it's kind of like, all right, if we're going to go to the Home Depot and pick something up to replace the insulation in this, what are they going to have that's the closest to our values? And it's probably the rock wool. Yeah. I mean, fiberglass sounds like it's made out of glass, but they're just using the word glass to mean plastic. And it's like, so that's, let's not use that. So yeah, probably the rock wool. But I think that if we had the time, and I'm not sure how much it would cost, but it's such a small structure, even if it cost twice as much, it'd be like not a big deal. But to order up sheep's wool. But this structure is never going to go up to the lab. So we don't have as strict of values. So for example, you can see it has a metal roof, whereas up at the lab, we wouldn't allow a metal roof.
Are you going to put a membrane in there too then?
Yeah. There will be some kind of membrane, and it'll be on the inside. Well, no, wait. It'll be on the outside. The membrane will be on the outside. And there were a lot of conversations about whether to use plastic or something similar, or we talked about we got in a whole bunch of craft paper, and we were talking about using that as our seal. So it'll be sealed and insulated. But the lap is going to provide a little bit of a seal. I kind of wonder if we could have gone for a little bit of tongue and groove action on this and gotten an even better seal. But I left it up to Josiah to decide, and he went with lap. So anyway.
I have a question.
Oh, go, Katie, go.
Just as a newbie, I assume that lap style means that you overlap each board. Does that mean like front, back? Or does it mean like one over the other? It couldn't mean one over the other. It would walk down the hallway. Can you describe lap style a little bit?
Sure. So what we've done is we've taken a router to the edge, and we've kind of made it so that on each board, like, let's say we're looking like on the left edge and the right edge. So on the right edge, we've taken away about a half an inch of material from the underside. So it goes from the right edge in, it's a half an inch, and from the back of the board towards the front, it also took out a half an inch. So on the right edge of the board, it's now only a half an inch thick instead of an inch thick.
Oh, like
Now,
little L's that fit into each other. I think I get it.
yeah. And then on the left side, we took away the same amount of wood, but it was on the top of the board instead of the back of the board. And now all these boards kind of fit together in a lap. Well, it's called a lap.
Thank you.
That's the
Thank you. That's
joinery. That's what it's referred to as, is a lap. So
This also brings up the question. Okay.
go ahead.
Oh, it brings up the question of natural caulk solutions, because I was thinking about what might replace it in natural situation.
When you're trying to caulk something, I know that for the solar food dehydrator, we did use silicone caulk, and it was a relatively pure silicone. But we try to minimize that as much as possible. Then we get into the whole space of glues and that kind of thing. We are doing everything we can to avoid all glues and caulks. Sometimes when you kind of need to cork something, we've been using cob, but a lot of times that requires you to kind of do the whole thing a little bit differently if you're going to use cob instead of something else. And then in certain situations where there's going to be growing and shrinking, it just shreds the cob. So it's like the cob doesn't do well in that scenario. So
would that be the same problem with beeswax or something like that?
There could be that problem with beeswax. And we do use beeswax for some things. And we're a little bit more open to using the beeswax. But even now, we are not as keen as we once were to use linseed oil. So while linseed oil is edible and things of that nature, we're just feeling like how close it is, like it's closer to our values than say paint, but is like not using linseed oil seems like is even closer to our values. So we are kind of like trying to find ways to even eliminate the use of linseed oil. And it's like there's going to be some times where it's a little bit of linseed oil or a little bit of tung oil is going to be the thing that we're going to want to do. Another one that we kind of are open to, I mean, a lot of people talk about hide glue. Well, it's made from hide, and it's kind of like, yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of things that are naturally occurring that are toxic. And I don't personally know, because like you could probably find an MSDS for hide glue, but I kind of feel like, is there other things that are a problem with it that are not on the MSDS? So I have my concerns about hide glue. Then comes Pineytar, and I kind of like the idea of the Pineytar, and there's things that you can do to kind of make a sticky resin with the Pineytar. Now, granted, this is kind of like where a lot of your turpentines and stuff come from, and those are toxic. But I don't know. I feel better using Pineytar than hide glue, and I would feel better than Pineytar than any of the other substances that we've talked about. But you're right. It's like, how do we seal something, or what is the substitute for those kinds of things? And I gotta say, like, I don't have a strong win right there. And I kind of feel like that's a big part of everything that we're doing here. Is it's like, let's try this thing which they say can't be done. So for example, here we have an outdoor building, and this building is 7 years old. And it was made clear by a lot of people that you have to paint that, or you have to stain it, or you have to put something on it, or the wood will be rotten and gone in 3 years. And I got to tell you, we were standing out there looking at it, and it's like, I think it's going to go another 50 years like this. Now you can see on the right side of the building, that's the north facing side. That's got some mold getting started on it there. But the side where you can see Laura is standing, where the solar panels are, that's facing east. And so the sun rises and hits that part of the building. And so the sun effectively sterilizes that part of the building. And so there's not mold there. And I think just by looking at this photograph, I think it's pretty clear that this wood is doing very well. It's not rotting away. So there's a lot of this knowledge, which is probably referred to as common sense. And we are violating the concept of common sense by the standards of most people. And we instead of treating it, we went with a larger roof line, pretty significant eaves. And I mean, does anybody doubt that this wood might last 40, 50 more years by looking at this picture?
It looks good. Can you rotate the building 180 degrees?
We can, but I think we've got other things to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the miracle of a relatively dry climate and dry air is on full display there.
There's something to be said for that, because if we were in, say, I don't know, the West Coast area of Oregon, where it's a little soggier and everything's kind of covered in a green slime all year, then I'm not sure how this would do. I think it could do all right, but I am not certain. I'd be curious.
Well, I think it would depend upon the type of wood as well. And that's one of the reasons where, cedar might come into play. But of course, you're using probably pine there.
Yeah.
Right? That was milled on site. And a lot of those coatings are really designed to protect against UV damage as much as water damage. And, placing a building in shade or providing other ways of, protecting it from UV can go a long ways towards making that wood hang in there. And of course, and you've gone through all of this, Paul. I'm just, for a topic of conversation, right? That you can spend boku bucks, painting, staining, preventing it from anything happening to it. Or in 15 to 20 years, you pop off all the sideboards and you go stick them in a hugel someplace and you start over. And which one's better?
That's a very good point, because as long as they've never been treated with anything, we could easily set them in a hugel, or we could even possibly use them for firewood.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Paul, I think I know your answer to this, but would you mind explaining your thoughts on milk paint?
We've used it. We're having relatively good success. Again, it's the same thing as the hide glue. I mean, there's a chemical reaction that's happening for it to work as well as it does. And so I have concerns. At the same time, I kind of feel like, I think another good thing to point out is that we did whitewashing here. And the way that whitewashing works is that you slather it on and then you let it dry, and you slather some more on, you let it dry. You have to put on like 7 or 8 coats to get it to be white. And we did it on a building, and then we also did it inside of Allerton Abbey. And all of it is flaking off. Even the stuff inside Allerton Abbey is just flaking off.
Oh, no.
And it's kind of like, well, what the fuck was that all about? We put so much work into that. That's not how we wanted to go. And then, and now people are saying, well, the lime that we used in that, and again, chemical reaction, to get the paint to stick. The lime that we used was a little old. And so it might have, because we're talking about slaked lime, right? Baked lime, cooked lime, the lime that's been heat treated, that's got a huge energy footprint embedded in the lime. And it's like, but apparently, you know, if you use something that might be a little old, then its chemical activity is basically gone. So, damn, you know, there it went. Now, there are clay-based paints where there's nothing in it but clay. I would say that I like that because I'm going to be far more confident in it. But I gotta say that the stuff about the milk paint, the even the linseed oil, and the hide glue, and the even the whitewash. For all of those things, I have to say, I don't know how good is it? How safe is it? You know, what's the downside? Can we do better? Now, I do know that like with Allerton Abbey, there's a lot of glass in Allerton Abbey, and it looks really beautiful inside. And most of the walls in there are unpainted. They are just straight mud right out of the ground, just the clay that came out of the ground. And but then for that one cell on the bottom side, we did that whitewash on the inside to really brighten it up. And that was Ernie Wisner's idea. And I do think it helped a lot to really brighten that space up. But it comes at a price. And I kind of feel like, you know, I wonder if the price is too high. And I'm because what we're shooting for is to have like this thing that's much more natural than your, you know, super platinum LEED certified stuff. I want, you know, we want to go for something far, far, far beyond that. And I'm worried about these materials. And I, at the same time, I haven't done enough research. So I guess the proper answer to your question is I am also a nervous Nelly. I would like to have the answer to your question myself.
Well, my answer would be that, you know, your milk paint can be indeed made with milk and hog's blood. I mean, that's why barns used to be painted red, because they could use hog's blood to make the paint. And and you know, because what did you have around? Well, you had a hog, and you know, and you have to bleed it. So great, you mix it in with the paint, you got red paint.
And the kids weren't drinking that stuff like it was Kool-Aid or anything. So
no, I guess not. And you know, and then gosh, you probably had a cow that was making milk, and all you really need to do is separate out the fat from the milk, because what you really want is the casein proteins. And but now you still have to add hydrated lime, right? I mean, it's basically a different version of a whitewash. And you know, it's a pigmented whitewash, but with some extra bits in there to give it some different sort of protein structures that'll help hold it together, I guess. And but you know, hydrated lime. And you know, looking around the lab or even base camp, I don't think there's a source of lime.
Correct. There's
and
not.
you know, and so although it seems like a really natural, nice product, I mean, it can be a beautiful product. You know, going really deep into it, you do wonder, is it the best thing to use in that circumstance?
So Katie's got her hand up. Maybe she's got the answer.
Ooh.
Oh, no. I have a question.
Okay.
So the paint, you're saying it's flaking off. What was going to happen besides flaking off? Like if it had been all properly limey, would it have like faded imperceptibly? Like what would happen for the good ending?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like so much that we're trying to do is an experiment. and both of you have been here to firsthand see that there have been some experiments that have failed, and it's kind of like we've got so much more to still trying to figure out, and a lot of it is going to be with, let's see how it does over the years. Ryan has his hand up. Maybe he has an answer to one of these questions. Ryan?
Yeah, well, a different tack. I was wondering if you guys have tried shosugiban at all.
Man, I don't even know what it was that you just said.
It's basically charring the wood. It's a thing they used to do in Japan. And then you could put that planer to work.
So, charring the wood is something. We've done some experiments. We've done a lot of charring to make signs. We've done the wood burning, and when we expose it to the elements, it lasts about a year and a half, and then it's gone. And now there's you can't read the sign anymore. So we have one sign that was put up about 2 years ago, and it got linseed oil on it, and it was a wood burned sign with linseed oil, and it seems to be holding its char quite admirably. You can still read the sign, and so I think that's far better. But I know that there's stuff where people will like putting fence posts in the ground. They'll char the post before putting it in the ground, and after visiting with a lot of people that have done that, I kind of got the impression that it does add about 10% to the lifespan of the post, but it kind of comes at a big cost, and there's a lot of work there. And in the meantime, we've been through a lot of iterations of putting posts into the ground. I really like what we do now, like in the greenhouse. And I'm not sure if you've been keeping up with that, but in the greenhouse, we put like a foot of gravel in the bottom of the hole, and then we put the post in, and then we surround it with gravel all the way up.
Yeah, that's what I do now too. It's so much better than cement.
Well, yeah, cement is a bad idea all the way around, because it's going to absorb the water, whether it's coming from the soil, and it's going to carry it to the post. Or the other thing that could happen is that there's water still in your post, and it'll absorb that and bring it back to the post. And it's just, hold it nice and close and squishy. And it's like, so cement is out. I also think that what Mike Ayler did is out, and he would wrap like 5 garbage bags, those big black plastic garbage bags at the bottom of the post. But then if there's any water in the post, it just accumulates at the bottom of the post and causes rot. And so it's like, well, that didn't work out so good. Plus, as long as the post can't breathe, that also is a different kind of rot. And so I really think that, of course, you got to look at the $50 house and how well, I'm going to say it is still standing. I was there 4 years ago, and it was still standing. And at that point it was like pushing 50 years old. So clearly it's not a horrible idea. But I also went to Glenn Congieser's place, and who's doing the same style as Ayler, and then he had replaced 2 of his posts in his structure because they had rotted. So it's like I kind of, and then we did a thing for a while where we were making a concoction out of diatomaceous earth and wood ash and borax, and then we would sprinkle that into the hole as we filled it, and then put a whole bunch of it right around at the top inch of the surface. But I think that the gravel approach is vastly superior. I've seen a lot of other ways that people try to do it, but I kind of feel like they are all crap, especially when standing next to the gravel approach.
Gravel's expensive. Do you guys have your own out there?
Sort of. There's about a quarter mile away from the property, there's an old abandoned gravel pit. But we don't
Perfect.
go there, just to be clear. We never go there. But we have a couple spots on the property where we can have a lot of a kind of a rock that falls apart really easy. And if we just go digging there for whatever reason, it kind of ends up as gravel. We do have several sandy spots for sand, for different kinds of sand. And some of them have like a little bit more like bigger chunks, but it's, and we end up sifting it out. Like we've got this spot that we go to where we call it the shitty cob pit. And if you go and you dig up this sand, it's got some clay in it, and then and some rocks. But if you sift the rocks out, you end up with a material that's like, if you just simply wet it, it's a low grade cob, and we can use it structurally for all kinds of stuff. And if you add some more clay, you can get a much higher grade cob, maybe even add in a little straw or other fiber aggregate. But you know, a side product is the bigger rocks, which, you know, gravel right there. Now, granted, you know, we're not creating enough cob, or we don't need enough of this cob in order to be able to get a lot of gravel. But every once in a while, like I think we went and got a big trailer load of gravel this last year, and it was like $30 for a big trailer load. Katie, you got your hand up.
I'm filled with questions. If I have questions, I'll raise my hand, and if it's not the right time, then just skip over. But would it be good to fill the holes in the gravel with the sand so that dirt doesn't take the place of it? Or would that be bad because it won't breathe as well?
I would think that if the post is going to be in a structure, then I think that what we would want to do is probably put a little cob on top of it to kind of make it so that, you know, stuff doesn't go down there. And so it would effectively, in a way, be kind of sort of sealing it. But cob does breathe a little bit. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. Another thing you could do is you could try putting like pea gravel on top of the gravel, and then sand on top of that. And that'll probably work out pretty good. Does that answer your question?
I'm imagining that you're trying to keep these posts dry as you can, but under the ground, there might be water that just comes through because it's been absorbed in the soil up somewhere and it's just coming through. And it might carry mud with it basically and leave that mud in your nice gravel spot. But pea gravel would have the same problem. Like then you would have more spots, but I just was thinking like, well, how can we long-term keep that breathability?
I was kind of thinking that you would have gravel all the way up to the top. And then in order to keep, you know, keeping it from plugging at the top somehow, or sending a bunch of material down there that might plug things up, like how might you seal the top? And so that's where I was putting pea gravel on top of the gravel. But you are right. It's going to depend entirely on like what's the story. Like if you've got a post in the ground that's going 4 feet down, what's that story 4 feet down? Is it muddy, or in our case, it's kind of sandy? You know, it's kind of a sandy, gravelly kind of thing. And so for us, we feel like it drains well, you know? And so then if we can shed water above the post, which is probably actually 96% of it, is that we're keeping the water away from the post and so the water is in dry dirt, then that's the biggest part. So all of our wafadis and berm sheds and stuff like that, it's like the post is in the ground, but it's underneath a roof which has a significant eave, and so that's keeping the moisture out. And then the dirt below it, for our case, for everything that we've built so far, the dirt below it was very sandy, so it'll drain quite well. So we're not going to have the problem of the mud kind of working its way into the gravel. But you're right. If you have that, that would be a problem. I kind of feel like, is there a way to make it like if we built a structure there, will the water or the mud eventually dry out there as it's underneath this significant structure? And that's, for us, yes. For you, I don't know. I mean, you're in Hawaii. I thought Hawaii was all this volcanic rock, so which drains really great, doesn't it?
It's all place to place. It depends. But yeah, most of the rock is volcanic, but there's other stuff in there too.
Okay. All right. So popping the stack. Katie, I answered your questions. And then Ryan, I answered yours. And then Elliot, did everybody get all their questions answered, or am I just off on a tangent babbling about things?
No, this is awesome. I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. All right.
Yes, I did have a question. As far
Okay.
as is my microphone okay, by the way?
Yeah.
Oh,
And
okay.
so this is a whole different person. This is Dominic, who
Dominic,
snuck
yeah.
in after we started.
I did sneaky. Regarding that milk paint question, why haven't you guys used like maybe 25 or 50 pounds of like porcelain on the last coating of your cob ovens just to lighten things up, and or the rooms in Allerton Abbey?
And you're saying porcelain?
Yeah, just porcelain clay, like
Super
maybe a
white.
pottery supply store or something. Just grab some really light colored clay.
And then somehow bake it on?
Just
No.
slip.
Nope, just slip. Yeah.
Just like, oh, okay. All right. All right. I had not considered that. I always kind of thought, like, in order to get the porcelain effect, that it has to be fired, and then it basically turns to kind of a glassy like substance. But like in Allerton Abbey, the walls in there are just the color that, I mean, I'm not certain, but I'm pretty sure that it came from our shitty cob pit, and then we sifted out the big rocks and kept the remaining sand and clay. Then we added a little clay and a little bit of straw. We may have even added, I believe, a little bit of horse manure. And so our final plaster layer is that. So it's not porcelain clay, but clay that we've pulled off of the property. Now, I think what you're suggesting is, hey, buddy, how about for that final layer, you use a clay that's like a super duper white clay, huh? What do you think about that, eh? Is that what you're saying?
That's generally it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a lovely idea. I mean, just a little bit of a super white clay, and we'll end up with much brighter, whiter walls. And I love that idea. I think that's terrific. I think what we need is a lot more of, I mean, I do feel like the people that are here are coming up with a lot of stuff like that. And we have other bigs in the world, for natural building coming through from time to time, and they load us up with a bunch of stuff, and then we go from there. But I kind of feel like when we go and work on something and we build a thing and we finally get it done, that like when the experts come by or other people come by and we talk about what we're going to build, it's too much for them to wrap their heads around. And so it's not until we get the thing done that they can understand what we're saying we're going to do. And then once it's done, then there's a whole parade of people talking about what could have been better. And I feel like that's been a very good thing for us, because then as we move on to the next one, we can use a lot of those ideas. But the other thing is that there have been a lot of the parts of the two Wafatis that we have built where I've said clearly, this is what we must do. And then the builders go up and they're kind of like, oh, Paul's a dumb fuck. He doesn't know what he's talking about. We know more than him. And then they do something that doesn't work. And a lot of times whoever's doing that, and once they get done, they realize that they've made an executive decision that was a shit show. And a lot of times they just bolt. They just go, because it's kind of like they don't want to live with the shame. And it's, so we got some of that too. But overall, I'd have to say that we do experience a lot of and whenever I hear it, like when we were going into the Love Shack, there were a lot of people that said, why would they do this? And then I would say, I'm so glad you said that. And it's like, you know, because they didn't have one to look at to see how it would turn out. So they were building it from the ground up. And then one person said, you know, maybe for something like that, you should have hired a professional carpenter. And I said, it was built by a professional carpenter. The Love Shack was built in one day. And actually it was built by two professional carpenters. And so, it's just kind of hilarious that, you know, it should have been built by a professional. Oh, it was. Well, then how did they make these mistakes? And it's like, what, you think professional carpenters never make mistakes? And so, you know, no, it's quite common. But the fact that they're gonna upgrade it now, and they can see the problems that are there, and because we put it together with screws, the screws just pop out real easy, and we'll reuse the screws to put it all back together again.
Yay.
So I kind of feel like we do a lot of that where it gets built a certain way, and we're doing such big innovative maneuvers where it's like, we're going to do 15 experiments all at once. In fact, I'm going to ask each of you a question, and let's see if anybody's got the answer to it.
Mhm.
I had a gal tell me that doing 15 things at once is unscientific. That what you need to do is one experiment at a time. And then, you know, once you've completed the experiment and it succeeds, then you do the next experiment. Never do 15 at once. Can any of you tell me why you want to do 15 experiments at once?
Well, I mean, what I would say is it doesn't matter how many experiments you do at once if you have good data collection, because that's the key.
All right.
For
Katie, your hand went up the second Julia started talking.
Well, you know, the optimal algorithm for finding a number between, you know, 0 and 100, right, is to jump to the middle. And
a binary search.
Well, yeah, and halfway to get there.
Yeah, a binary search.
Yeah. And so I think it's kind of like that. Like if you were to do one at a time, that would be much slower. And this will get you a bunch of answers. Now, it's true, you could muddy your waters by like messing your experiment up, but as long as each one has enough isolation for data, then you're jumping more optimally.
I like your answer better than Julia's, but basically the binary search answer is my answer also. And now Elliot has his hand up, but just a second, Elliot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, here's my answer. We do 15 experiments, and then we encounter 2 problems. But we know that the 2 problems we encountered have nothing to do with like 9 of the experiments. So it's got to be with these 6. And then with each problem, we can kind of say it might have something to do with that or that or that or that. And then we can conduct further experiments which could eliminate the problems or continue to exacerbate the problem. But we can then begin to narrow down the what's causing the problem. Where did the problem come from? What was it that failed? And yes, from what Katie was saying, it's about narrowing it down and doing it faster. Doing 15 at one time is so much faster than one at a time. I mean, would we have to build 15 Wafadis to get a lot of these answers? Or, there's going to be, I mean, if we have a universal success, that was, we did 15 leaps all at once. Okay, Elliot, your turn.
Ooh. Yeah. Well, I have a similar point to Katie, and that is that perhaps the word experiment is incorrect in the scientific sense, right? Because you're not necessarily trying to identify the, which substance or approach has the greater marginal benefit on something. One of the big questions here is simply trying to figure out which techniques or strategies should be explored further. And that's a very different kind of approach, right? Than trying to narrow it down to an exact answer about which is best. The question is, which one should we look at next? And for that, yeah, you just throw it all out there and see what happens. I mean, it's not unlike land racing,
Right.
your seeds.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Ryan's got his hand up. You're going to have to unmute your mic, dude.
Yeah. I was gonna say I think that it has a lot to do with how many independent variables you have too. So if you have one control and 15 independent variables, you can perturbate each one of those variables in a different experiment. You could also choose one variable and perturbate that variable by a different amount in each experiment. And both of those will give you valid data.
So I think everything that everybody has said, including the gal that started it off by saying, do it one at a time. So what Ryan just said, what Elliot said, what Katie said, what everybody said, and Julia said, it's all correct. They're all correct. All those are correct answers. And I am making a choice to do a bunch of experiments, but it seems like as these things are going together, then there's ideas for even further experimentation. And I find myself oftentimes drawing a line. Like, I think adding that one in is too many experiments in one project. And so I choose to hold off on that idea to a future project. But I gotta say, I think that for a lot of this stuff that, well, and I guess what I was trying to go at before, like with the Wafadi, is it's like for a lot of the feedback that we're getting, which is great feedback, I feel like those same people could not give us that feedback when we started, because they couldn't get their head wrapped around what we were even trying to do. So I kind of feel like with what we have accomplished, then people can look at it and see what we have, and then they know how to make another one of those, but this time adding 7 things that are better. I kind of feel like the Willow Feeders are a really great example, and how like Willow Bank is our second Willow Feeder and Willow Wonka is our third. And we made the seat a little bit higher to accommodate a bigger urine diverter. And we, because we did that, there's only 1 hole instead of 2. And then we just raised the floor inside. And we did a few other things in there to make it a better system. But people made mistakes along the way that now need to be corrected, and we can point at those and talk about those, and that way when we build another one, they'll be without those mistakes. Although, as long as the mistakes exist in any of the 3 Willow Feeders that we have, we can't build another one because people will look at the mistake and say, that must be the right way because it exists right there. And it's like, no, remember I told you 7 times that that was a mistake? Oh, I forgot all 7 times. And I couldn't wrap my head around what you were saying because I wasn't at that part of the build yet or whatever. So Ryan, you still have your hand up. Or you got another thing to say?
Oh no, I just didn't
Okay.
it.
All right.
Let me
All
do
right.
that.
Well, okay. So we're talking about doing this weekly. And to do this kind of permaculture smackdown thing weekly, we talked about the idea. Now, first of all, do you guys feel like you're up for trying to do something like this once a week, like at this time each week? I mean, you can hold your hand up to say yes. There, I'm seeing hands. There they are. Okay. And so we could do just an open format like this again, or one of the ideas we had is to review a book. And we kind of had a little bit of a poll, and it sounded like the book might be Desert or Paradise by Sepp Holzer. When it comes to this stuff about just doing just open questions or doing like a chapter by chapter book review, what are your guys' thoughts? Starting with Katie, who still has her hand up.
I would love to do the book, the chapter by chapter review, but maybe with a question or two at the beginning or end or somewhere, so that people who have questions could do that too. That's my thought.
Okay, maybe sometimes maybe we go every other week, like every other, because I know that there's 2 questions that people from the Patreon thing typed in that we haven't gotten to yet, but we've already hit an hour, and I don't see these 2 names on the list of people that's here. So there's like 7. There's 7 of us here right now. Elliot, you got your hand up.
Oh, I do. Yes, I think that it would be neat to do some sort of book club style reviews about things. I thought that your reading of the Big Black Book with Alan Booker was really fascinating to listen to. I don't think that we could necessarily come up with something as informed as those conversations were, but I do think that there is a place in the podcast world for that, and people would find it interesting.
I enjoy doing it myself, just like screw the podcast, but the fact that it does seem to be of value to people listening to the podcast is like, oh well, okay, I guess I could do that. But somehow the need to put it into a podcast, or the desire to have it in a podcast, somehow gets me to set aside time to do that. And so I'm glad that the pod people are hungry for it. Kyle, is this our Kyle, or is this some other Kyle?
This is fake Kyle and real Kyle simultaneously.
Good. Hi, Kyle.
Hi. Just to comment on that, I don't know, as a podcast listener, if you plus 7 people who happen to show up that day doing a book review is all that interesting compared with you versus the one with Alan was really good. He has a lot of good stuff to say, but it doesn't have to be a podcast. If it's just like, hey, once a month, the 7 to 10 of us have an hour long, who are Patreon supporters have, our book meeting. That's great. I don't have anybody to talk to about when I read this stuff.
Well,
if it ends up being a podcast and it's interesting to other people, I don't know if that would be interesting to me, like not being involved, but that's, yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you all for supporting my Patreon thing. That really helps. I mean, I'm not sure if it's good news or bad news, but in the end, I don't get any of the money. it all goes out to getting the podcast edited and set up for y'all. But you know, if there was more, then that would help to fund all of our projects and stuff, and so that'd be cool. But if nothing else, I do kind of feel like it is a strong propulsion, because for a while there it was kind of like, wow, I spend this much money a year to have, you know, the podcasts. And so it was a bit of a discouraging element. Like I was putting out fewer and fewer podcasts because it's like, you know, it costs me money to put them out. And but now it doesn't. It's like the podcasts probably break even between the money from the podcasts and then, you know, further efforts by people like Bill, who, you know, fix all the things as a volunteer. Then we seem to be doing pretty good. We're breaking even right now. So thank you. I thought it was kind of funny. I put out a shout out to I think it was the Dailyish email. So, you know, 40,000 people. And I said, hey, if you put in like $1 to the Patreon, you can get in on this call and stuff. And that brought in 0 people. it's like, I guess we should have used that Dailyish email space for something else. But yeah, I feel like the rapport of the people that are here for the call today feels good to me. And we could talk about Desert or Paradise.
Yeah, I've got that book.
Yeah.
I should look at it again.
I still haven't read it because I was planning on doing a chapter by chapter review with it because I was so excited to get it. Now it's just been collecting dust on my shelf for years. And for a while, Zach Weiss wanted to record that with me, but I haven't seen him for a long time. So, oh well.
He's a very busy guy.
Yeah.
I've seen what he's been doing.
That movie he's working on looks really amazing, and I'm keep wondering when they're going to come out with it.
I'll ask him. I paid him money to come out and visit me, so I'm supposed to be on his schedule.
Oh, good.
Yeah, there's a whole story there, by the way, Paul, that could come out at some point or time, in terms of owning land and when does one seek such outside counsel and so on and so forth.
I saw the thing that was about buying land, shopping for land, and I wrote something for Make It Missoula years ago about how to shop for land, and it's so big, it's a 3-part thing, and I don't think it's ever been mashed into a podcast, but that's something that we could do at some point.
I'm currently shopping for land, so if you need, if you do that put that high on your priority. If you ask me my opinion.
Okay, well, you know, Kyle, maybe the thing to do is to, well, first of all, does anybody know if I already made it into a podcast? The How to Shop for Land?
I don't think so. I've listened to them all, and I feel like the most I got, like the best information I got, was at the ATC a couple years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like you talked about it when you mentioned years and years ago, like, you know, 9 and 10 years ago, you were talking about looking for land, but you never had like a podcast dedicated to it.
Okay. All right. So, I guess the thing is that a lot of people come through and they ask questions and I answer questions and I say the same thing over and over and over again. And I can't remember if I said it once in a podcast or not. And so, Kyle, you have my email address. How about if you and I talk about starting to record something that's based on that stuff that I wrote so we can kind of get it into a podcast? How's that sound?
That sounds wonderful. I'll write up something. I'll hit you up this week and we can.
And we'll schedule a time.
Yes.
I should try to contact Alan again and resume our work with Permaculture Designer's Manual,
Yes.
because I do agree that I was certainly enjoying those conversations. And so it'd be great to continue with that. I want to throw a question at you guys, and that is that we're talking about doing Desert of Paradise, and I thought maybe we could do instead Fields of Farmers by Joel Salatin. And the reason is that his whole book, Fields of Farmers, is about what he calls the curmudgeons, the curmudgeon farmers. So these old guys that are like 70 something, and they have nobody at all to will their land to. And so the whole book is apparently about how to connect the curmudgeon farmers to the youth that, you know, want to farm. But, you know, the youth are thinking like, okay, I want to farm, so I guess I got to go to college and get a job and then join the rat race, pay a mortgage, all that stuff. And then once it's all paid off, then I take what my income streams then and let it accumulate enough so I could go buy a farm. And instead of that, then of course, you know, how about if we connect you directly to the curmudgeon, and then you can skip a lot of those steps. And I kind of feel like skip is exactly the same, but completely different. So it's about connecting those same curmudgeons, which we refer to as an Otis, with a youth, which we refer to as a pepper. And so I have not yet read the book Fields of Farmers. I just remember the last time I was hanging out with Joel, we were both presenting at some event, and we were like put together as the speakers. And so we were visiting. So this was what he was writing at the time. That's the book he was working at the time. So that's what he wanted to talk about a lot. And he says he's been contacted by hundreds of curmudgeons who need somebody to come and be of use, and then they will will their land to them. But I kind of feel like at the same time, the story of Skip and Pep starts with Mike Ayler, who went through 100 interns and none of them made the cut, not a one. And it's like, and he kept calling me every 2 months to say, give me somebody worthy. And I was kind of thinking like, you know, how do you measure worth? And that's where I started getting the idea of like having a list of tasks that a person could do that would prove their worth. And, you know, Pep and Skip grew out of that. All right, so the question is, what do you think? Desert of Paradise or Fields of Farmers? And so, any
I
opinions?
vote for Desert or Paradise.
Well, my issue is I've got a copy of Desert of Paradise. I don't have a copy of Fields of Farmers, but I do see the tie-in to your Kickstarter. Good point.
All right, Katie, you got your hand up. You got to turn your microphone on.
Yes, it took me a second. Not to be a pain, but I do vote for both.
At the same time.
Well, maybe not the same moment, but I think there's room for both. It depends on your schedule, probably, Paul. Certainly, I would love to hear you guys talk about the Big Black Book again, too, of course. But the Kindle edition, like there's Kindle, you can get these books in digital format if you do digital reading. So I think they're available
instantly.
I think they're both really valuable. I'm super excited to read some more of Sep's work and hear that critiqued. That's awesome. But this one is super on brand. The other one, it's a good time for it. It's really appropriate for right now. So I definitely can see it both ways, and I would love to hear both.
Yeah, Julia, did you hear the subtext there? It's like they'll sell that book to anybody. You just like, just because you don't have it now, you know. All right, Elliot.
I think starting with Holzer is a great idea, just sort of as a foundational piece. And I think talking about Joel Salatin would be great. Of course, he's got a bit of controversy surrounding him now. I don't know that that matters to us, but as a sort of launch piece for that sort of a feature, it might be better to avoid said controversy.
What's the controversy now?
Oh no, he's been canceled?
Yeah, he's been deplatformed. Mother Earth News cut off their ties with him, and there's been this whole kerfuffle about it's just sort of white privilege farmers. I don't know. I can't quite decode it myself.
So I want to take this moment to go to the ugly, dirty place that everybody hates whenever I do. And it's like, yeah, I've heard this stuff about Joel Salatin for years. Oh, he's a libertarian. And oh, he's, what is it? Somebody was trying to say he's a sexist. And it's kind of like, and then it's like, well, why? What had happened? And then they describe what happened. And it's like, how did you get sexist out of that? And it's like, I don't even remember what it was. It just sounded so weak. And then I kind of feel like I see the shit about me, and it's kind of like, yeah, there's a grain of truth in what they're saying. You know, it's like the Fouch video is all about like, oh, Paul Wheaton's such a piece of shit because he locked that gate. And it's like, you were at a PDC which didn't have a gate. And the way that you say it makes it sound like nobody inside the gate has a key. And it also sounds like I took a bunch of people, tied them up, put them on the land, and then they're all trapped in there because of the gate. And it's like, they knew the gate was there when they got there, and they voluntarily accepted the key and moved up there. And it's like, and
there's no fence.
Yeah, you can walk around the gate pretty easily. Your escape plans are in the trillions. So it's kind of like, so there's a grain of truth there, but they're making me out to be a monster because of it. And it's like, at the same time, I just recently got raked over the coals because of Sepp Holzer. And it's like, and so these crazy people came out of the woodwork to bash Sepp. And it's like, we've deleted the shit about Jeff Lawton I don't know how many times. And it's like, for every person who's ever accomplished anything, then yeah, there's these crazy lunatics coming out of the woodwork to say that they're shit. Therefore, I don't know what the scandal is, but I have a feeling, and we're in an era where people who have accomplished nothing, that somehow their report on something somehow brings them into the spotlight as somebody of worth and value, and all they did was bitch about somebody, and it was unsubstantiated.
Yeah,
I can't make sense of the arguments that are lobbed against him. I mean, yes, he's a libertarian. Yes, he's got a very Christian angle on things, and so on and so forth. But none of that affects the basic principles of his farming systems and the logic therein. And so I don't bring it up because I think that we shouldn't talk about Joel Salatin and put it out there. I just wanted it to be out there that there is a possible sort of little shitstorm that might decide to attach itself because of it. That's all.
I kind of think that like maybe we should research what is being said, and if he is being inappropriately wronged, that we should do whatever we can to stand up for goodness and decency, and we should support those people who are doing good and decent things and are having their work destroyed by dumb fucks who are just dumb fucks. They don't even have a mission. They just want to say, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. And they're glad to trash anybody to get attention. And I kind of feel like in the world of permaculture, I have never seen it this bad. It's just awful. And that this is the main reason why permaculture is not a household word. It's because of this weird, twisted crap. This anonymous putz on the internet says something nasty. They probably just made it up on the fly just to get attention, as trolls do. And now the works of Joel Salatin are being thrown in the bus. Now, I could be wrong because I don't know what the current story is and stuff like that, but I just kind of feel like we're just seeing this over and over and over again. I mean, how many more times am I going to get thrown under the bus? And I think I'm a fucking prince. And it's like, I think really this is the worst that you've got, the thing about the gate. And it's like, I mean, every single ugly thing is like, man, they really had to spin that up to try and turn it into a dark thing. And really, that's all you got. I mean, I kind of feel like, why don't we have better permaculture leaders than we do now? And it's like, it's this shit. All right.
Paul, can I send you via PM a few links?
If you want. But
well,
I hope
you want to research it. So, I mean, I can find some of those things and send them to you.
I hope it's like something that is, substantial and true. I mean, on the list here, I put up a thing that if we didn't have enough questions or enough to talk about, one of the links I've got is to a thread that I wrote, which I know hasn't been put into a podcast yet because I wrote it just a little while ago, called Haters Gotta Hate and Rapers Gotta Rape. And it's kind of like, of course, because what happens is we keep having these people saying haters. Well, what are you going to do? Haters got to hate. And I kind of feel like, yeah, that's step one. And then they're going to go through 15 steps until we're getting up to like rapers got to rape. And it's kind of like, hey, here's a thought. How about if we nip it in the bud at haters got to hate? Because I know we're all firmly in place of like, no, rapers don't gotta rape. We will stand in and stop that shit. And I kind of feel like we should do the same thing for haters gotta hate. No, that is not fucking okay. And so let's step in there and stop that shit. That's not okay. And it's kind of like, but we're just on this twisted path where it's more fun to crush somebody doing good works than it is to stand by somebody doing good works, and to say that hate shit has got to go, man. And when we're all kind of curious why we're all dying from this global disaster, and why didn't the permaculturalists just say something louder or whatever, it's like, well, it's because haters got to hate, and we all embraced it. And so we all went down the drain with the haters, as opposed to like, let's be supportive of these people doing great works. I feel so passionately about this, but I kind of feel like I'm just annoying the fuck out of everybody by saying it, because Because of what I observe, what I see. People just want to see the drama. They want to, oh, good, some drama. Let's go look at that happening over there. So, Katie, you got your hand up.
I think a lot of people agree with you, and I am so grateful for the policy in Permies that lets us be in an environment which is nice, a nice environment. And I think we need more of that. I think this Wild West, anonymity has benefits, but it also has drawbacks. And I feel like there are situations where we don't need those drawbacks in our lives. And I think you're right that a lot of people who would make content don't want to have a squad cars coming to their house and like death threats on their children. And it's just, there's nothing you could do that would make that worth it. So they don't. And if we could have a nice environment, we would have a lot more participation.
I think, and this is a big reason why I think Permies is doing well, as well as, I think Permies acts as an incubator for the future of permaculture, even though there's a lot of people that refuse to go to Permies because I'm in charge of it and they think I'm a piece of shit. And it's like, all right, fair enough. In the meantime, it'll grow, and then eventually they'll be like, well, I guess I'll tolerate it even though that asshole's in charge of it. But I think a lot of this comes back to, is it 7 years ago? It was 7 years ago. Permaculture Voices won. Julia was there, but Willie Smits was there. And I gave my keynote, and my keynote was the velocity of permaculture. And I talked about this problem. And there were several people that came up to me after that presentation, and they were pissed as hell. And they complained that because of what I said on that stage, that I should be banned from future Permaculture Voices events. So they complained to Diego. And but Willie Smits came to me, and he complimented me profusely and said that it was one of the best presentations he's ever seen in his life, and he's so glad that I was saying it. And then later he shared other stories with me of the shit he goes through because of the work that he does. And it's like he's got lots and lots of stories of ugly, awful, horrible things. And on top of that, once Diego got him booked, Diego was called like the very next day by somebody bad-mouthing Willie Smits and convinced Diego to nix Willie Smits. But before doing it, Diego decided to call me. And I said, well, you got Joel Salatin coming as a keynote speaker also, right? Well, you better fire him too, because he's got all kinds of people that hate him. And don't forget to fire me. And Michael Pollan, you better fire that motherfucker. And it's like, you're going to have to fire all your keynotes because there's people that hate them all. And it's like, you're going to listen to the word of some anonymous dipshit over a person that has so much accomplished and has done such magnificent work. And so I talked him out of it, and so he kept Willie Smits. But it's like, it just never ends. It just goes on and on and on. And it's like, it would be great to have a lot more support. It would be great if the Fouch video, because currently the Fouch video has more upvotes than downvotes. It would be great if it had more downvotes than upvotes. And I mean, like, that whole video is nothing but hate speech. And it kind of reflects a community that we are part of. These people that prefer drama over decency. All right. I think Dominic had his hand up for a while, but he put his hand down. So
I did. I was just going to say, love what you were saying, and wanted to clap.
Thank you. I've got a lot more to say in that thread that I wrote, that big long essay that I wrote. Haters gotta hate, rapers gotta rape. I kind of there's a little bit of a tie-in to Bitcoin. It's like there was somebody that posted the other day. I felt like I didn't even have the time to reply, and they said, how does Bitcoin fit in with permaculture values, considering how much energy it uses for each transaction? And it's kind of like, well, if you use the Lightning network for the transactions, the cost of the transaction is less than a penny. So then I think that would mean that a transaction uses less than a penny's worth of electricity. And so I don't understand where we're talking, because they keep saying like a single transaction uses more energy than it costs for like a house for 2 months. And it's like, well,
Something about the encryption and the way the computers are just whirring around in the background.
I think we got to
Something
separate
special.
out the transactions from the miners.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, okay, how much energy was used to mine that gold that people were, are using as an alternative currency? I mean, we could talk about paper and fiat currency and stuff like that, but there's also this whole element of like, there's some people that can't control Bitcoin, but they can control the fiat currency, and they don't like Bitcoin. And so they're spending millions, if not billions of dollars to spread FUD about Bitcoin. But the bottom line is if the transaction costs less than a penny and somebody somewhere has got a profit off of that, then surely the energy cost is well below a penny. And I kind of feel like, how much is a credit card transaction? How much energy does that use? So, but in the meantime, yeah, the miners, yeah, that's like, they gotta spend like, $15,000 in electricity in order to be able to get a Bitcoin that's now worth about, I don't know, what is it worth now? About $40,000. Yeah, that's a big energy suck. I'm not personally mining Bitcoins, but I know there's some people that are. I think we got to separate those two ideas. And it's like, but I kind of feel like I'm not a big Bitcoin person. And so I don't feel like I'm qualified to be the person that really answers, but I do believe that whatever the energy is if they're going to say it's going to run a house for 2 months, and the average cost of running a house is about $200 a month for all energy, so it's got to be $400. They're saying, yeah, that's $400 per transaction in energy. And it's like, then why is it costing less than a penny? I think there's a big disconnect there. Clearly somebody is like working the FUD engine there pretty hard. And it's like, do you choose to believe the FUD, or do you look at what's sitting right the fuck in front of you? And it's less than a penny per transaction. Clearly there's less than a penny of energy being used in that transaction. How much of a penny is being used for a single credit card transaction that Bitcoin's not involved in? And it's kind of like, I wouldn't be surprised if it's about the same. But fuck if I know. Not my field of expertise. But it's like, now all these people are going to hate Bitcoin. Well, maybe they're trying to get the price to go down so they can buy in. So they're going to say scary things. But as far as I can tell, Bitcoin fits in pretty damn good with permaculture. As far as I can tell. But again, not my area of expertise. And when people talk about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and shit on Permies, we allow it. Fine, go ahead, talk about it. Plus, I think it's cool. Years ago, people wanted to pay me in Bitcoin for stuff. And so I said, okay. And so they paid me in Bitcoin. And at the time, the Bitcoin was worth $600. And now Bitcoin's pushing 40 grand. And it's like, neat. Easy money for me. I think more people should pay me in Bitcoin because that was a fun ride.
Yeah, it might be worth considering like moving other assets into Bitcoin as well.
I agree. I think it's at this point in time, for me personally, I think I think that we are near the tipping point for stuff at Wheaton Labs. Everything is growing really well. We only have 2 PDC tickets left. And so if anybody wants to get on that, they better buy those tickets right away. You know, the crowd we got here now, they are great folk, and we're doing good stuff. I mean, we were looking at that plane over here, and we're looking at the Love Shack getting an overhaul, and I don't know, that we're getting a lot of people. Like, we say, okay, boot time is 40 hours a week, and then of course there's nest labor time in addition to that. But we've got a lot of people that are putting in a good 60 plus hours a week to do things here. And so it's really feeling like people who are here and they want to see the community grow. They want to see the project succeed. They want to see everything happen. And so it's moving forward. And when other people show up, they're like, I want to hang out with these people forever. I think we're close to the tipping point. I think we're about to take off. So when it comes to the idea of like, oh, let me just take this money and go stick it in Bitcoin, I'm more like, no, right now I'm all in on our projects. And frankly, you know, we're still running on a pretty tight budget here, and I wish we had more operating capital. But Lara's here, and she's doing she's in charge of the rentals and events. And so hopefully we're going to see more rentals and more events, and our property is going to become self-sustaining, as opposed to me, you know, coming up with lots of money to pay for everything. You know what, and I'd be open to at the same time. I've got a jetpacker that's calling in her chip, and she's calling in a big chip, and it's kind of like, ooh, boy, right now, huh? So I'd be open to the idea of a couple of more jetpackers getting in. And I mean, the original set of jetpackers all came from the pod people. And I think everybody here knows what a jetpacker is, right? Is there anybody?
I don't. Tell us again.
Okay. All right. So the story goes like this. I bought the lab outright, and I had enough money left over to put a down payment on a nearby property that would be on the grid, and thus we could weld, and it would already have a well and everything and stuff like that. So I wanted to find a property near the lab to be base camp, where we could kind of, you know, do a bunch of stuff and then make trips up to the lab to build and get things going. Originally, I thought I would live at base camp for 3 years, and then I would live in a wafati up on the lab, and comedy happened, and, you know, but all right. There, as luck should have it, there was a property very close to the lab that was available for sale, and I had enough money to put 1/3 down, and properties in the country are generally owner financed because banks won't generally touch them. And so owner financing is generally 1/3 down, and then, like, you know, some typical rate. And at the time it was 5% was kind of a very typical rate for a mortgage. And so the owner said, you could have this property if you put 1/3 down and agree to pay 5% over 30 years. And so it's, you know, a mortgage. And it's kind of like, so I said, deal, I'm in. And then they replied to say, we changed our minds. We want all the money up front. We withdraw our offer of owner financing, which I'm kind of thinking, like, you can do that? You can just say, yoink, changed my mind, fuck off, like that. So rather than getting into the legality of that, I just started looking for other properties. And the other properties were much farther away and were shit. They were just awful for all kinds of reasons. And it's kind of like, man, that's too bad. That one property was so close, and it was pretty nice pretty nice. And so I mentioned it into the, I don't know, probably into the podcast, I think, or maybe online. But a beautiful thing happened. I kind of felt like George from It's a Wonderful Life. And 7 people wrote fat checks and said, I'd love to have 5%. They didn't ask for a signature. They didn't ask for a lien. They just sent fat checks. And so the amount of money that they sent was enough to be able to buy the first property outright. And so we call them the jet packers. And then over the years, once in a while, a jet packer will call in their chip and they'll say, I need that money back. And so I say, I'll try to get it to you in a few months. And so far, I've always managed to get it back to them in a few months. And then every few years, I'll pay out interest to them. Not every year, but everybody that's currently in a jet packer with standing funds, they've always been cool with it. They've never said anything like, you got to do it this different way or anything. And so with the jet packer now calling in a big chip, and I got the story and I could see why they want it now. And I think it would be cool to be able, like right now, right when we're so close to the tipping point and, we're sending some vehicles into the shop for some major repairs and things. It's kind of like, boy, a little extra coin right now would be kind of nice. So to get past this tipping point. And of course, we're going to do a Kickstarter too. And I'm hoping but anyway, there's lots and lots of stories, but I'd be open. And there's 2 people that offered to be a jet packer. And I said, I'm going to save your information and get back to you. And we've got the well drilled, but we've got to get the pump house and the cistern and the pump and the plumbing and all that stuff. And I'm kind of waiting for spring to roll around, and then I'm going to exercise those jet packers. But if we had a couple of more, that'd be cool. That's all I'm saying. So did I explain it well enough? Any questions? Did I leave anything out?
No, it's good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. There were 2 questions that people asked. So I think what I got the feeling of is that when we come back, let's record Desert Paradise. But I think what I want to do first is, because the other thing is that I know Katie had 2 questions, and I don't believe we got to those. So maybe for Permaculture Smackdown next week, we'll take on Katie's questions, and then we'll also take on the questions from Penny and Ivar, who posted to the Patreon thing. Plus, I feel like maybe the thing, so I guess what I'm trying to say is, first, let's get out of all of the Patreon peeps questions, and then we'll start the chapter by chapter review of Desert or Paradise. Does that sound good?
That sounds good to me.
All right.
Take care of your Patreons first.
I like that. Yeah. I'm really grateful that the Patreon peeps back all of this and keep it going and make it less of a burden. And feel free to whip out some more questions and have them ready for when we do this again next week. I said something about like something about doing it in the middle of the week, because Permaculture Smackdown used to be recorded Tuesdays at 2, but then I kind of feel like a lot of people were saying, I'll do it if it's on the weekend. Is for the people that showed up, is there anybody that's on this call now? And I'm thinking already, Julia probably cannot do Tuesdays at 2.
Well, ironically, 2 for you is 1 Pacific time, and that is my lunch hour. Although I'd have to find a room because I have a roommate in my office, so she doesn't want me.
Yeah, but if you had headphones on, It would be
Right.
like you're taking a call in your office, right?
Right. Yeah.
But it does seem like if we could hear your roommate on a call, that might be a bad thing.
Like a HIPAA violation.
Right. Is there anybody else on this call that could do Tuesdays at 2? Hold your hand up, say something. So nobody else can do Tuesdays at 2. So maybe we got to, okay, Katie can. Yeah, all right. So maybe we got to stick to the weekend, because it sounds like a lot of people were kind of like, yeah, the weekend works, Tuesdays don't. Plus, then Julia can be a little bit, say a little bit more kind of a thing. All right. Anything else we want to put into this podcast before we call it all done? Nope. All right. I think I'm going to try and find the button to stop the podcast. Where is this button? Oh, more. And then there it is. Okay. If you like this sort of thing, come on out to the forums at permies.com, where we talk about how to clean up a nice plane, homesteading, and permaculture all the time.
All the time.